Gamers of Reddit, what underrated not so popular game holds a special place in your heart and why? Hydro Thunder. A great game that no one plays anymore. Reddit, I forgot to tell you all why I loved it. The reason why it's my favorite is because my best friend was my neighbor and we would hang out at his house all the time and play Hydro Thunder Hurricane from hours on end. We finished the game in 2 days, and for a 7-year-old that's a big achievement. He sadly moved out and died due to type 2 diabetes. This game will always hold a special place in my heart because of that, and I will never forget about him while playing. I recently saw it in the Xbox store and it brought back memories of me beating my friend and him training to get better than me. Regrets on PS1. Take me back to that supermarket level and let me run wild. Yes. This was a huge part of my childhood. The mini golf was the shit. There were so many legitimately good challenges in that game, for both its time and audience. The circus, the supermarket, the toy store. I even remember a night level in Tommy's house where you have a flashlight to scare away ghosts. Oh, and that fooing level in the bush maze with those fooing geese, Jet Force Gemini, Nintendo 64. You could play as the little dog with a gun strapped to his back. It was so dope for its time. I invested so much time into this one. Had that moment of regret when you had to turn around and rescue all the bears though. After what I had done to them on my first pass. Definitely holds a special place in my nostalgia. I used to let my little brother be P2 and control the robot dude, Floyd, who accompanies you. The multiplayer was dope. Used to play through whole weekends with my then best friend and his dad. Never managed to finish single player though. Way too many secrets and Teddy rescues in a time of shitty internet. Absolutely glorious score though. The splattering was everywhere. You could also cripple enemies by shooting off their limbs and they would just wait for their death, whimpering. I was so nostalgic for this game. I actually downloaded an emulator and got a USB N64 remote to play it with, but the sensitivity just isn't the same. Aiming is way too hard and I'm just sad that I couldn't enjoy it the way I used to. The Kung Fu Panda game for the Xbox 360. Don't ask me why. But I got 100% and all the achievements on that game. Would def play a remastered version. Edit. A lot of people have said that this brought back memories from their childhood, and I'm happy I could do that for you. The funny thing though, is that I was a freshman in college when me and my roommate did this. Anyway, glad I could bring some nostalgia to some people. I was just gonna comment that here and then I saw this. I'm amazed to see another person who shared my childhood. I'd give you an award if I had it, Fossil Fighters. But not Frontier. FF1 and FFC were my favorites, from completing the game 100% to just digging as a pastime, they were my favorites. Edit, thanks for the silver, kind stranger. Some of my favorites, too. I never did like Frontier. I would have at least enjoyed it if I could have at least picked 3 Vivisors to fight with a la FF1 and FFC. Why did they take that from the player? And why did they introduce the shots? I called them steroids. Also, I really didn't like them giving you a fairly OP Vivisor they encourage you to use, and then take it out of your grasp at very inopportune moments. They also lowered the amount of time to dig fossils from 90 to 60, making you use more time boosters. They had a weight limit on cars instead of letting you use whatever tool you needed. They removed buster points and replaced them with the weird chisel things, and I did not like then making gold, red fossils teaching new versions of moves when it wasn't necessary. I also did not like them replacing the position system with the stance system. It was way too radical and quick of a change. My apologies. I didn't like Frontier much. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Yes, it's a movie tie-in game, but it had good level design and some cool mechanics. I loved it as a kid, and I've even tried revisiting it as an adult, and it actually kinda holds up. It got decent reviews. It currently has a 71/100 on Metacritic. It's not bad, but I think the reputation of movie tie-in games held it back. Edit, I played the PS2 version, but the GBRPGs people keep mentioning sound interesting. Also, this has a lotta upvotes, aficionado-ness. One of the first adventure games I played. I didn't really understand most of it, but it was kind of creepy, very challenging, and definitely sparked my imagination as a very young kid. My dad has never liked adventure games prior or since, but he'd play Fictionado with me every once in a while and we'd have a good time getting lost in its, at the time, complex level design. Enter the Matrix because GameCube was peak childhood for me. There was that strange period in the early 2000s where we got some really fun movie tie-in games. Enter the Matrix was a little janky but it was a blast to play. IMO. Chronicles of Riddick in '04, Spider-Man 2, and the Lord of the Rings games were all really good considering that they had releases coincide with the films. It was either Enter the Matrix or another one of those early Matrix games for PS2 that I beat in an unconventional way. There's a level in an office building where just send unlimited enemies after you and you're supposed to keep moving. I was bored, and young, and stoned one night and just stayed there slaughtering everything that spawned. Eventually I stopped using guns and melee'd everything. This led to me maxing out on ammo so ammo drops kept piling up. After a while the game got laggier and laggier. I kept going and eventually it crashed. So I crashed the Matrix. If that isn't a win I don't know what is. Gladius on the GameCube or the Xbox I believe. Co-op turn-based tactics game that I played a ton of as a kid. It's got a quick time event for combat to get crits, or you can turn it off and the AI will do it for you, with a random chance to crit. It's got a light, medium, heavy advantage triangle and a bunch of cool classes like undead summoners and satyrs who spend all their time drinking. I think it's rated pretty highly but sold fairly poorly, so it's kinda a cult classic. I've played through most of the game half a dozen times and it's always a great couch co-op game to return to. Chrome Mounds for the Xbox 360 was positively dope. It was a PvP mech game, which is becoming rarer and it had positively sick customization options. It was not particularly kind to newbies. There was an entire artillery class off weapon based around shooting directly upwards, checking your map and relying on your teammates to confirm hits and misses lol. I remember the first time I deployed without realizing it would be nighttime, and being surprised that the map was basically pitch black. I eventually learned to turn on my gun lights, only to give away our position. The only lights in the city after that point were gun flashes and some unfortunate fool who caught fire, which of course, drew more fire. Bipedal snipers could shoot the rocket pods off of tank-dreaded defender hounds. A completely viable build for this game was an armored-up quadrate hound armed with nothing but a couple of satellite dishes for communication. It was a blast, and it will never get a sequel. I loved this game so much. The persistent online wars, hours experimenting with new mech builds go beat the evolving metas, all of it. It wasn't for everyone, the meshs were meshes and footing slow, a four-legged heavy one could take forever to get to a location, so you had to know your shit, you had to have a plan and work as a well-oiled team. Miss this game so much. I was just thinking about this game the other day. I had a terrific sniper mech that dealt so much damage. All I really remember was having the three largest sniper cannons and tuning the location and sequence the guns would fire and so the recoil from the first cannon would make the next shot line up with the target. All three shots would land in the same spot. It would easily knock the legs or weapon systems off of a mech at crazy distance. It was fun to create the spotter meshes too. Barely any weapons, just a massive radar that you could watch the map from and call out enemy positions or flanking maneuvers. Fantastic mech game and I haven't seen anything like it since. L'autre, The Two Towers, edit. Okay, gents, I remember E.T., but The Two Towers seemed to have genuine effort applied. You had the actual cast provide voices for the game. The gameplay built onto the story without undermining it, etc. It was fun. The Return of the King game also seemed fun and had great improvements, but I don't think the characters' faces moved during cutscenes, like the mouth not even opening when they spoke in cutscenes. I'm also not sure the voice cast was genuine. I distinctly remember Gimli having a French accent for a lot of that game, a couple games for me. Sins of a Solar Empire. It was a 2008 space-based strategy game in the same vein as Homecoming or Star Wars Empire at War. But it was massively improved in pretty much every way. It was very chess-like, properly balanced, and fun. You could sink literal hours into the game without even noticing. And that's just the base game. There is a wealth of mods out there and people are still modding the game. Of my Steam library, it is by far the most played. I haven't played Stellaries yet, but I have a feeling it was inspired by this little gem from 8 years prior, Ace Combat 04, Shattered Skies. It was a 2001 fighter jet game. AC is a pretty mainstream name now, but I don't think many people played AC-04. Back then, AC was still establishing itself. The gameplay was fun and the graphics were good for early PS2. But where this game shines was in story and soundtrack. The soundtrack is one of the very best ever made for a video game. It's right up there with the best from Hollywood. And the story is great too, a unique telling of a war story from the eyes of a young refugee boy. The game was short and relatively simple, but it stays with you in a way very few games ever did. I loved it then and my love for it has only grown in 19 years. I wouldn't call Sims underrated or even underappreciated, but you're right that it doesn't really ever come up in the mainstream like it deserves to. Sims was one of my favorites in HS. I would have friends come over and we would just play all night. So many good memories. Sins of a Solar Empire is also way up there on the list of my favorite video game titles. Almost all of the Ace combats are special to me. Makes me smile when I see TRLLF these Reddit threads and actually find people that share a similar sentiment, despite it being a very niche series. Tachyon, The Fringe. It's your run-of-the-mill spaceship simulator, done really well with an interesting storyline and A+ voice acting from none other than Bruce Campbell. You start off working for the Alliance goody two-shoes but you end up in the Fringe, which is outlaw space basically. You have two separate families of ships to choose from, Alliance or Rebel, which are themed appropriately. Alliance ships look like they rolled off the assembly line in the same factory, unified color schemes and everything. Rebel ships look like a motley collection of Junkers rigged with pew-pews. They range from tiny gotta-go-fast fighters to light frigates, so you can choose your style somewhat. There are capital ships that you can fight by taking out subsystems, but mostly you'll have capital ships fighting each other with fighter swarms in between. Really cool, made even cooler by the running commentary of Bruce himself. I just remembered getting this on GOG years ago, and never loading it up, as is tradition. Damn, going to have to actually install and play this now. Lunar, Silver Star Story. It's sort of well known amongst JRPG fans, but never seemed to gain the widespread notoriety of the Final Fantasy series or the like. It's fairly typical as far as gameplay mechanics go, your standard top-down sprite-based turn-based combat JRPG, but the story is legitimately great, and working designs. The team that was in charge of localization for the US market did a phenomenal job of infusing humor and life into the translations. It originally launched on Sega CD and was then remade for PS1. I've played both versions. The PS1 remake is better balanced, the original Sega CD has a bit too much grinding required, and also has some great voice work and cutscenes. A+ totally recommended for any fans of the genre. There was a little-known game called Choose where you adopt animals and have to care for as many of them as possible. Sometimes they don't get along. Actually, most of the time they don't get along. So when you're adopting them, you have to pay attention to their likes, dislikes, and habits. Mr. Bojangles, female, always uses a litter box but requires regular diabetes medicine. Doesn't like black cats. Then you're running around like a cat lady, feeding them, breaking up fights, petting them, and perpetually cleaning up urine and feces. You get flea infestations. You get rats. They get diseases like mange. Oddly enough, my cockroach infestation once was said to have gotten mange. They have babies even though the shelter mistakenly labeled them as spayed. They get in massive brawls because the shelter lied about some cat with a description that said she had all positive habits and no dislikes and it was a cheap adoption, and it turns out they're actually Satan. You sell weird shit on an Etsy-like store, like hats, knit out cat fur and cute photos of some parakeet you took. Oh yes, you read that right, you collect fur after a cat fight, knit it into things, and sell it. If you use dog fur, you can actually knit a dog fur dog sweater. Then you can go to the animal shelter with your money and adopt more animals, just cramming them into your house. It starts out with just cats and then dogs, and then you get weirder and weirder animals. Then you're trying to get your original herd of cats to stop ganging up on the panda bear and eating his ears off. Sometimes social services visits and you have to hide the animals and herd them as the inspector walks around the house from room to room. I had a crappy cat once that I was thinking of getting rid of, and it turned out to have a rare hidden talent for distracting the inspector. I paid money to rename the damn thing Don't Kill, so I wouldn't accidentally ever let it die. Whenever I would die, it would inevitably be the ending where every square inch of the house is covered in animal waste and they ceremonially ate my lifeless body. But if you choose your adoptions well, you can get a weird self-sufficient household where dogs break up catfights for you, and your perpetual rodent infestation can actually be useful because they leech your animal shit rather than just steal all the cat food. Eventually, you can actually become a home for foster children, but I could rarely make it because this game was hard. Then you get frequent social services visits, but you also get money just for taking care of the kids. They don't seem to mind that, literally. You are feeding them cat food, dead rats, and the corpse of a monkey that the cats spontaneously decided to murder one day. But the kids get sick and die if they're around too much urine. Anyway, it reminded me of my grandma. Even the way your character slipped on a puddle of urine and fell and said, "Oh gosh." Snake rattle and roll furnace. I didn't have many games as a kid, and begged my mom for some other game for Christmas. She saw the box art for SRNR and joked that she'd get me that one, which I immediately dismissed as too kiddie for my taste. Christmas morning she handed me a gift. It was SRNR. I was heartbroken. Then she gave me the game I asked for. I don't even remember what the game I wanted was, it fucking sucked. I think some stealth fighter plane game where I could never manage to land after the first mission. But I spent countless hours on SRNR. Well played, Mom, well played. Check out our other videos and subscribe and leave your suggestions and experiences in the comments below. Have a great day.